right, and joining us in the studio here to discuss today's topic in power supply, we have the Executive Director, Independent System Operator, Transmission Company of Nigeria, Engineer Mama Lawal. Engineer Lawal, you're welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
And also with us here is the Executive Secretary, Association of Power Generation Companies, GENCOs, Dr. Joy Ogaji. It's a pleasure, Dr. Ogaji, to have you here with us this morning.
Thank you, and good morning, Nigerians.
All right, we also have with us in the studios Engineer Balarabe Abdullahi. Engineer Abdullahi is General Manager in charge of the brain box, if you may, of the transmission in the power sector in Nigeria, located in Osogbo, Osun State. Engineer Balarabe Abdullahi, pleasure to have you with us on the program.
Thank you. Good morning. Yes.
All right. Also here with us in the studios is Donald Etim. Etim is Chief Marketing Officer of the Abuja Electricity Distribution Company. Donald, we're glad to have you.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, viewers.
All right. And then also part of this conversation, later on we'll be bringing him in as a regular whenever we are having conversations on energy matters. We're talking about audio or more formal. Once we do have him, we will of course bring him online. So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, it's our pleasure to have you on Good Morning Nigeria, even though these are not particularly happy times for power consumers. I imagine also for those of you who are also in the power sector, for instance, for the consumers in the Abuja area, you go to buy power credit. I don't know whether you have experienced this. And those who are vending the power credit, they don't even have light. So you're asking yourself, oh, what's going on? So let's begin with Engineer Mama Jimo Lawal, who is one of our regular guests. We've talked about the epileptic power supply in the country, but this year has been most unusual. What is happening?
Thank you very much. Yes, as a matter of fact, the current state of power supply in Nigeria is anomalous to what the trend has been over time. And I'll crave your indulgence to put it in context. A few months ago when I was here on this program, we had cause to observe that effective 2017, there has been a sustained trend of improvement in grid stability as typified by the collapse incidences recorded over time. We observed in the year 2017 we had 15 collapse incidents. 2018 it reduced to 12, and it took that trend up to the year 2021 when we recorded 2 collapse incidents. As a matter of fact, we have always strived to ensure we do not record any major disturbance, but looking at the current grid configuration, it would appear that we still have a lot to do, despite the fact that a lot, has been done. It's a continuing development exercise, and it has to be sustained. We have every cause to believe also it is being sustained. However, there are certain parameters, critical parameters, that we really have not been able to put right. Not because the industry players are not doing enough, but it happens that these critical parameters are really beyond the control of the core industry players. So there has to be an integrated approach to all these considerations, because as they put it, the chain is as strong as the weakest link. Concerted effort is being made in this direction. Like I mentioned, it is anomalous. We are in a state of flux. We expect, with the strategies being put in place by the federal government through the Honorable Minister of Power, Engineer Abubakar D. Aliu, and also the regulatory interventions of the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, we would expect sooner than later all this, will become a thing of the past.
Well, I agree with you, because you cited that it happened in 2017 on 15 occasions, collapse of the grid. It happened again in 2018. And in 2022, we are also experiencing the same challenge. So that means that perhaps adequate action was not taken to tackle the challenge, because having a grid, maintaining a grid as a nation is not a rocket science. And we have seen a situation where when we bring up a program like this and table power sector as a major topic, we keep hearing of efforts being made here and there, but Nigerians are no longer interested in all this. Why? Because they believe that if there's a challenge and there are professionals. Now you said that the challenge is beyond the industry players. Now who else? So just make it clear to Nigerians to understand really what are these particular efforts being made.
Okay, let's put it in context. I had actually tried to portray, the systematic improvement in grid stability. I talked about what the situation was in 2007, how it improved over time up to last year when we recorded 2 collapse incidents from 2017 to 2021. 15 collapse incidents in 2017, and by last year we recorded 2. As a matter of fact, we shouldn't record any. Right? Shouldn't. You see, when I talked about the stakeholders, let's look at the NCC. You start from generation, you talk about transmission, then distribution. But generation, especially the thermal power plants, require gas to power their generators. When you look at gas, there are, we have always talked about how do we ensure that this gas is available when it is needed. And we have different mechanisms for, actualizing this. This is being pursued. It is not as if the gas suppliers are not in the equation. They are. But we have issues related to gas availability. These are certain strategic administrative mechanisms that are required to make this gas available. And that's what the regulatory intervention of the Commission would seek to address. And I think in the next couple of years, in the next couple this intervention, will be brought to fruition, and we would expect that remarkable changes will begin to emerge as we progress.
Thank you, Engineer Norman. We will return to you. Now, because you were just talking about generation and the thermal power plants, let's bring in Dr. Joy Ogaji, again, another regular face on Good Morning Nigeria, whenever we are discussing power matters. What is the, you're already smiling. What is the situation? Let's be realistic. What is the situation? Earlier in the year, we were told that there was low water level, and therefore the hydro plants were affected. Now we hear is gas issue. Same gas. When we want to brag, we say that Nigeria is not actually a crude oil country. Nigeria is a gas country. And with the war in Ukraine and Russia, and the disruption in gas supplies to Europe, we have also been positioning ourselves to supply gas to Europe. So now we are hearing thermal power plants don't have gas. What is the issue?
Good morning, everyone, viewers online, and thank you, NTA, for inviting me. Like you rightly said, I'm a regular here, and if you take an inventory, each time I come, we have not spoken anything outside the same thing we're speaking about today. I was telling somebody that I joined the sector in 2011. Unlike him, I'm sure he has been there for 30 years. I joined in 2011, and when I joined, the same issues we're discussing were the same issues that were being discussed when I joined the sector then. That was pre-privatization. Now, why is it that 9 years nearly, because by October 31st, it will be exactly 9 years post-privatization. Why is it that nearly 9 years post-privatization, privatization, mind you, was viewed with the mind that with privatization we'll get to our El Dorado. And now, nearly 9 years post-privatization, we seem not to be close to our El Dorado. In fact, as a matter of fact, our assessment is that the current situation of power is back to pre-privatization times. Exactly. The issues have resonated again and again. So yesterday, even before NTA invited me, because I've been, one of the reasons why you have a PhD is that you can research. So I've been researching, I've been in this sector. Why are we not finding solution? Because I don't want to go and talk about, oh, it is NCC's problem, it is DISCO. Because I've come to realize that there is an endemic problem. All these things, grid collapse, whether estimated billing, overbilling, underbilling, are all symptoms of a major problem that we must investigate, diagnose, and then find solution to. And I have been doing that research, and I've come to find out that the problem in the Nigerian power sector and also in other sector is akin to the dead horse theory. Now, what is the dead horse theory? The dead horse theory is a theory that is has its origin to the American Indians, Dakota to be specific. And what this ancient theory says is that if you find out that your horse is dead, dismount. So we have a dead horse in the power sector. So we have been trying to make this dead horse ride. And in doing that, instead of coming to the realization that the horse is dead, we have got new horses, dead, all dead. Join them together and see if they can ride. They are not riding. We get whip, koboko, and all different type of whip. And I've been whipping this dead horse because he's dead, he can run. We now get consultants to come and teach us on how the dead horse can run. They can't succeed because the horse is dead. Then we now do training outside the country. Go there to go and learn how a dead horse can walk. And a dead horse is dead. It cannot walk. Okay, now we now bring down the standard. The privatization documents, we bring it low in implementation and enforcement and say, okay, if we lower the standard so that dead horses can operate, then even at that, it can still not work. Then we threaten to terminate the dead horse. Because he's dead, he doesn't care about termination. So I can go on and on what we have been doing in order to make this dead horse walk or run or whatever. So the power sector has a dead horse. And as I told you, I'm doing my research to find out what is the dead horse. Because clearly, I can't say the power sector is a dead horse. If the power sector is a dead horse, then what do I replace it with? We need the power sector. So we need to find out what is that dead horse. Is it our modus operandi? Because I have reviewed this extra. This extra is one of the best documents we have. From section 1 to 100, it captures everything we need to make the power sector work. I've looked at the market rules. We have one of the best market rules in the world. I've looked at the grid code. The grid code is one of the best. I've looked at the market procedures and various documents. Mention them. Is it the performance agreement? I've looked at the PPA, the vesting contracts, and the dead horse that I am almost locating is our modus operandi. Now, let me give you, for example, if the extra says that we should have an independent regulator, for instance.
Extra meaning Electric Sector Power Reform Act.
Yes,
Right.
yes, Electric Power Sector Reform Act 2005. If, according to section 34 of this book, you should get an independent regulator. Independent, as the word English means independent. Now, how do you get a regulator that is independent? How were they appointed? If they are politically appointed, then you don't expect independence. Because what we've been doing is eating our cake and then still expecting it on the table. Because if you are politically appointed, these regulators, not adhering to section 34, which talks of meritocracy and competitiveness in appointing them, how do you expect them to be independent? Because he who pays the piper dictates the tune. So this is just an example of the dead horse we're looking at.
Well, that theory, I think we will dissect it further in the course of this conversation. Because many Nigerians will believe that you are speaking in parables, but all the same, you have made a very good point with respect to the fact that you have personally, tried to investigate and diagnose, but what is remaining is that of a preferring solution, or rather, the solutions being preferred, being put in place or being put into practice. The documents you mentioned that we have in the power sector are usually Nigerians' way of tackling issues. We are good at articulating beautiful documents, but when it comes to implementation, we're going to have issues. And I want to bring in Dora Letin here, who is the Chief Marketing Officer at Abuja Electricity Distribution Company. If there are challenges, in the distribution of power in Nigeria, have you people been able to investigate and diagnose this challenge? If yes, what are the challenges and how best, could those challenges be tackled?
Thank you very much for the question, and good morning, viewers, once again. When we resumed as the current management of Abuja Electricity Company, the first thing we did was to try and get a full scope understanding of what the issues are, not just within the industry, but also within the company. We dimensioned these challenges internally and externally. We found that as an organization, as a business, there were systems we needed to upgrade, to work on and upgrade. And part of even these systems, if you permit me to use the term, are people. So we needed to fix people, talent management issues. We needed to optimize our internal technology base to be able to accommodate and do more. Externally, we found that there were issues about network visibility. There's first what came up initially, the absence of a SCADA system. The SCADA system allows you to have full visibility of a network end to end. Beyond there being no SCADA system, we also found that practically all our feeders are overloaded. As we speak, we are working on deloading those feeders. We took several field trips and we found as well that there were illegal network extensions or expansions. So you find connections and power lines that exist physically on land, and they do not exist on the network configuration that we have on the system. Beyond this as well, we discovered as a result of regular outages, vandalization was at its peak. And this is a major concern for us at this time. So these are some of the key issues we found, and there were no spares, there were no accessories to fix devices that have gotten spoiled in the process, no replacement parts, transformers were knocked off. Communities will tell you, we lost our transformer, or ADC came to carry our transformer for repairs and we've not been replaced for 2 months, 3 months. What personally piqued me as a customer or marketing communications person was the fact that across board, our service centers were completely dilapidated. So you look at how a service center looks, and then they tell you this is how much money comes through from this place. First, you ask yourself, how does a consumer or a customer get to this place and part with his money? What level of comfort do you offer him? We identified all of these challenges. Just on the technical and commercial part of it, we prioritized 40 of them. And we gave ourselves a timeline to say, within 2 to 3 months, we must fix all of these things, even as we have other industry-wide challenges. So like Dr. Gaji pointed out, I went for my first radio show after joining some months ago, went the second time, went the third time. I came back, I was troubled by my conscience. And I called my colleagues and said, look, we can't keep talking about low generation. Because some of these things I've heard even as a child. We can't keep talking about this. These are things that are there and will be there with us for a while until we fix the system. Let us address what we can address in bits and pieces and give the customer hope. Because the most vilified Nigerian, outside of the Nigerian police officer, is the popularly known NEPA man. We are very vilified. We do not have a right to talk back because we committed to giving service and we have not delivered that service the way it should be. So these are some of the challenges. And as an organization, we have taken steps. We're working on some of these projects, and to give credibility and credence to what we're doing. There's this popular notion outside there by customers that, oh, the average disco supplies power to the rich. They're taking power from the poor. And it's really not true. So we started these intervention projects from the rural markets and the semi-urban areas. Within the larger franchise, we have had to work on places as far away as Masarawa, Lafia, where we had improved power. We went in there with metering. We ran a service-based tariff campaign just to optimize people's awareness before migrating them. Last week or two, we were in Bida to commission an injection substation. But around here, I'm very concerned about the area around Karu, Maraba, Jikwe, and all of these other areas. Because the customers there have been the most shortchanged. They've had very few hours of power. There were areas that never had power at all. Until 3 months ago, we looked at our network configuration and decided to manage the little supply we have a little differently. We said, let's start from 2 hours to 4 hours progressively, and then maybe we'll improve it. By the time we run the length of the interventions we're having currently, most of them will come to full fruition by about 2 months at most. We will have improved, not just improved supply, but also more reliable supply. Because our systems, when we deload the systems, when we deload the feeders, they become more stable. Around Karu, all the way to Jikwe, we have a deloading project where we bring another feeder called K6. The simple common sense we are applying this, taking residential customers off, separating them from industrial or SME customers, so that both streams of feeders are singly dedicated.
Okay. Donald Etin, thank you very much for the explanation. I'm sure that consumers in the Abuja electricity distribution franchise area will be pleased to hear what you are saying. But just keep this at the back of your mind. You are a new management team.
Yes, sir.
Did you inherit a dead horse? That's one question we're going to ask you. Because following up on Joy Ogaji's theory, because all the things you are saying, feeders overloaded, XYZ, the previous owners, before the debt became too heavy for them and then the creditors came in, were busy collecting tariff, electricity tariff every day and giving excuses as to why they couldn't supply power. So you will tell us the state of that dead horse, whether it was already decayed before you came in. That will be later on in the course of the conversation. Now, we understand that Odion Mofama is with us now. Let's just see if we can, if your viewers can see him on the screen. Odion Mofama, energy expert and CEO of New Hampshire Group. Odion, I'd like to have you on the program this morning. Okay, our engineers will work on the audio, and once that is sorted out, we'll come back to you for your first shot. Now, we understand the audio is fine, but I want to come to the studios now and bring in the general manager of the National Control Center at Oshobo. That's Engineer Balarabe Abdullahi. That's where the National Grid has its heart. And of course, you've heard the various comments by the guys and complaints also by Nigerians. Why are you guys having these epileptic seizures at your control center?
Thank you. Good morning, viewers. We at the National Control Centers, we are shoulders with the responsibility to operate and manage the grid. But what we realized recently, there are a lot of constraints within the discos and also the gencos and also the transmission lines. And before we have stability of the grid, then definitely the generation, that is the supply and demand, have to be at equilibrium. So there are so many factors, and those factors are arranged to generate, and they are subject to gas constraints and also water management. When there's no water in the lake, then definitely the capacity of generation at that particular time is not there. And the expected generation also, when there is no gas, then definitely the number of units on the grid will be so limited. So those are the issues that we're facing. And sometimes, especially during the rainy season, when there are tripping of 33 kV feeders, then definitely there are going to be a backslash to the grid, and definitely there are going to also be an issue. And at the same time, multiple trippings of transmission lines because of faults, it will affect the grid. So that is the reason why sometimes the expected generation and supply to consumers are so limited. So those are the issues we are facing now. And we at NCC, sometimes we find out we talk to both the discos and generating stations within second, mid, and hourly to make sure that everything goes according to plan to stabilize the grid. And when we discover there is this stop on the grid, then definitely we have to go load shedding, massive load shedding, to make sure that we don't lose the grid. So those are the issues we are facing now.
These issues did not start today, from all indications, and from what all our guests have said so far. We've been living with it for a long time now. Why I'm raising this concern is the fact that when one knows that there is a challenge, the usual thing is to devise a means of tackling the challenge, especially the one that has been protracted, such as this issue of grid collapse. What are the efforts being made? Because from all indications, this might just continue, right? And we are growing in population. and many estates being established across the nation, and those estates will be powered. So it's like there's an expansion going on, while the grid is suffering from all the factors that you have enumerated. So what is the way out of this occasional collapse of the grid, which you control?
That way out is how to manage the grid, is to provide an adequate SCADA system to monitor the grid. And now recently, the TCM management were able to deploy a stopgap solution by using the IoT, that is Internet of Things, which for us to monitor the megawatts, megavar, current and voltage of all the power stations. So that will help us to manage the grid. I think all the three sectors, the transmission, generation and transmission, they knew the problem, and what we were told, they were trying to resolve it, because there are several meetings called by NEC during the NCC meeting and the previous one to discuss the challenges, and we have the hope, and also based on our interaction with the GENCOs, the effort they are putting to get the gas. Then definitely, as you said, really is worrisome. It's worrisome, but they are trying their best, and we're putting more effort to make sure that everything is better than before. We knew Nigerians are not happy. It's a sad event. When massive load shedding comes, a lot of feeders were affected. People are out for very long time. But I think recently, I think it was 1st January, July, there is this partial activation that we have to be much engaged, so that when there are issues, there will be penalty. But I think we have to sit up, we have to expand more our network, because now presently we operate a single grid, and when there is small distortion on the grid.
Is it ideal to operate a single grid for a nation? What is being done in other times? So because invariably in those areas, those countries, where we have steady power supply, they cannot be relying on one grid. So why are we there? Is it not possible to expand the grid or something? Well, you can come in there.
Thank you very much. Yes, as he explained, grid stability is shaped by a number of factors. If the integrity of the grid is compromised, then we have problem with reliability. I explained. For you to have a system with big inertia, a system that when you try to shake, as it were, it doesn't, give it appears, it will appear to remain unperturbed. Okay, this integrity is shaped principally by the generation. Not only generation, you have the transmission system. In the power system operation, you have the consideration of operational safety, grid reliability, and resource optimization. We have had issues with resource optimization because we have so much generation base, but substantial amount of this is not available. Of course, the generators can explain this. It is all encompassing. I had to mention really that only an end-to-end consideration of the issues will solve the problem, and the stake players, the industry players are on top of this. They're on top of this. We just have to put this in context. It's not as if nothing is being done. A lot is being done. That's why I use the language anomalous, that this situation is anomalous. If you don't have adequate generation, grid reliability becomes an issue. Reliability is about, the degree of certainty that your system will perform up to the expected standard under certain conditions. If generation is inadequate, the transmission system is compromised, and the distribution end, the demand side management is suboptimal, then the integrity is compromised. When you have the least perturbation, such as the tripping of a line or the massive tripping of distribution feeders on account of stormy weather, you lose the grid. So these are some of the issues. But we need a grid that is automated to be able to tackle this effectively. And there has to be resource optimization across board. That's why that synergy is required. We need this collaboration to ensure that we have a grid that is operated reliably, a grid that is adequately optimized.
When it was NEPA, were we having all this analysis of all this optimization on the? When I mean, I'm not being cynical or sarcastic, but how many times? Yes, I recall. I mean, years past, you said, look, there was a shutdown at Oshobo, but we couldn't be having this on a regular basis, and we're saying, oh, generation is an issue, transmission is an issue, and then distribution is also an issue, because now we've also been working on the transmission lines. I'm just saying this, Engineer Maman. Of course, your explanation is noted, but just for our viewer out there to understand precisely just what is happening. Is it that this privatization or this unbundling is a challenge? Is it the dead horse, as Ogaji says? Now let's bring in Odion Mofoma, an energy expert and a regular guest on Good Morning Nigeria whenever we are discussing power issues. Odion, once again, we welcome you to the program. Well, it looks like probably you are living in an Eldorado where you have stable power supply, but for the rest of us, we do know that the power situation this year has been horrible, and we have been listening to all the reasons why this is happening. What is your reading of this darkness that we've been plunged into?
I actually feel the frustration of Dr. Ogaji and the frustration of millions of Nigerians that have had to deal without power. Particularly when diesel is now above 800 naira per liter. So industries, businesses, homes have had to suffer. I know banks that shut their head office by 5 p.m. They closed down because of power. So it is this year, the power situation has had an adverse effect on everybody entirely. And like Joy has, like Dr. Ogaji has said, 9 years after privatization, we're in a state where the situation of the power sector is as it was pre-privatization, despite the fact that over 3 trillion naira has been invested in the sector over the last 9 years. So one starts to really wonder, are we heading in the right direction? Are we stalled? Is it comatose, as your report put it? Or we can still make a way out of it? And just to summarize for the benefit of the viewers out there, I think to my mind, there are about 5 issues that have affected the sector and still affects the sector. The first is the lack of investments over time. The ADC director spoke about overloaded feeders and all the rest. It's shocking that 9 years after all the feeders, after privatization, second management in ADC, the feeders are still overloaded. We have the absence of contracts and the non-enforcement of even the few contracts in the market from a regulatory perspective. We have poor corporate governance across the industry. I mean, it cuts across everything. So when you're the corporate governance structures of the stakeholders is weak, then you're seeing some of these effects. Sadly, is affecting everything. We are also seeing structural issues with the way and manner the Nigerian electricity supply industry is structured. The national grid system, unfortunately, cannot work and will not work. And sadly, that's where all of these investments have been going into to stabilize a national grid system that is not feasible as in the country we are in. Abuja cannot solve our power problem, I'm sorry to say. We can do all these discussions in Abuja, but it will not solve our power problems. We then have to start to look at solutions. And the last part is actually greed and some human factors. I think greed plays a key role in all of this because you'd find out that certain stakeholders, due to greed, the right investments are not made, and then it affects the entire network, right? But I think we focused enough on the problems. Viewers must be overwhelmed by all the problems. How do we get out of this whole situation is really my focus here. And I think it's time to start to look at a situation where we bring in the states, the municipalities, the local governments, and even cooperatives into the electricity business. We cannot have one single line market where it's generation transmission, distribution, just one line, and then if you don't get power supply in that line, you're out of it. I know communities that are enjoying 24/7 electricity. They're not connected to the national grid. So it's false to say that some people are not we are all suffering from this power situation. There are people that are not suffering from this power situation because they are not connected to the national grid. So we must start to disengage ourselves from a national grid system that is not stable. Somebody the MD Oshobo mentioned that one small perturbation of the grid knocks off the entire grid. We can't have a situation whereby somebody goes to, out of vandalism, sheer sabotage, will cut down a transmission tower, and then the whole country goes into darkness. That's national, in fact, that's terrorism. So we can't expose ourselves and keep investing in a structure and an infrastructure where anybody can bring it down and the whole country goes on its knees. We're about to enter into we're in the political situation environment now. You're going to see a lot of these grid collapses because people may want to score political points and point to some form of issues. Some people may also want to cash out because obviously if national grid goes down, investments have to be rallied and corralled around to make sure it works. We can't be in that situation. That's why it's important that the new legislation, the constitutional amendment by the National Assembly that now empowers states to go into generation, transmission, distribution is fast-tracked at the states' houses of assembly. They need to push that law. Even if it's just that amendment, they need to push it fast so that states can come into the business and they can start to make regulations for electricity within their states. The other thing I think we also need to focus on is to start to look at a situation where we can enforce contracts. I was very happy when the NEC chairman talked about contracts now going to be signed into entered into by parties. We wait for July 1st to happen. Let me see how those contracts will be activated. We have waited for this contract to be activated for over 8 years. So it's gladdening that finally maybe this contract will be entered into. But behind contracts, there's also the enforcement of the contract. So I think it's up to NERC to now tell Nigerians and show Nigerians that they can enforce some of this contracts, because without it, it will be hard.
Odion, let me stay with you and ask you to explain some of the 4 points that you itemized. As a matter of fact, I picked interest in one aspect of it, which is in terms of structure. What do you mean by that? Because the structure we are in now presently doesn't seem to be working, and if we have to continue with that, it will appear that we already signed collapse of grid at all points. And when you mentioned the fact that some people are enjoying 24/7 power supply, those who are not connected to the national grid, of course we also wonder about the preponderance of that section of Nigerians who are enjoying steady light, and what did they do? And what could other section of Nigerians could do as well to enjoy 24/7 without being connected to the national grid?
In terms of structure, the faulty market structure, our market structure is built around a national grid system, a single national grid system, right? So that means electrons flow from one end and then the cash flow comes from the other end and services all the parties. In addition, we've created monopolies at the distribution side of the end of the business. So only Lagos has 2 distribution companies, struggling to even meet the needs of Lagos. But other discos cover like 4 states, 5 states. For instance, the Enugu distribution company covers the entire southeast region. That is a very big market, right? So you have a situation where these people cannot meet the needs of the customers there. They are overwhelmed, right? So from that market structure, a single national grid system, every single issue, either at the generation side, the transmission side, or the distribution side, affects the entire country. So that is the structure of the market, and it's so faulty. The people that are enjoying 24/7 power. So, for instance, go to Bonny Island. Bonny Island, they have a 15 megawatt power plant, which they generate, transmit, and distribute within the island of Bonny. That has been in place for years, even before privatization.
and that service is extremely reliable. There are a number of clusters in similar to the Bonny Island model. So what I think is, for us to move forward, we need to start to look at distributed energy systems, where people are we're looking at franchised areas where generation, transmission and distribution happens within that cluster, right? If you take the cell phone analogy, MTN did not start to roll out base stations in one single go. They had clusters, they rolled out in clusters. We now need to look at the power situation and say, look, let's look at economic clusters, let's look at commercial clusters, let's look at residential clusters. How can we infuse generation in there? How can we get dedicated generation to meet the distribution needs of those entities? Until we start to look at that structure, our reliance on a national grid system will not get us anywhere. So that's what I mean by looking at a faulty situation and trying to remedy it. And states play a key role in this structure. States need to start to make their regulations, because when they make regulations, that will effectively ensure that people and investors and communities are able to invest and manage the electricity infrastructure and supply within their areas.
All right, Odile, thank you very much. We'll return to you later on in the course of the conversation. Now, back to our other guest, Joy Ogaji. The issue has been raised about transmission. When I read the story myself, I was alarmed. But of course, it was at the peak of the grid collapse, where it was stated that Nigeria's power generation dipped to just 9 megawatts. 9 from, it was said, 3,700. It was a widely reported story, and up to this moment there has been no rebuttal of that story. Now, we also heard at some point that, the reason why there's low generation is that the thermal power plants, that's to say the power plants that rely on gas, were undergoing maintenance. And then you ask yourself why all thermal power plants should be undergoing maintenance almost simultaneously. And of course, there's also the issue about Kanji and Shiruru and others, where you have, they say the low water. This is rainy season, and why we should be having low water levels at this time is an issue. What is it that the Gencos are having in terms of generation? Because again, the argument is that if there isn't sufficient generation, then there can't be grid stability. Are there dead horses also in the Gencos?
Okay.
Are there dead horses also in the Gencos? So you give us, because we have to be elaborating on that theory of the dead horse.
Thank you so much. Like I said in my opening remark, the issues cut across all the segments within the power sector, and I did not exclude any part when I started, and I said we all need to identify the dead horse and deal with the dead horse so that we can put the dead horse to rest and get a live horse to ride us. And my colleague Odio, from when he made his own comment, has lashed on some of those areas that are responsible for the dead horse theory. And until we deal with those issues, we will not. So, answering your questions, why or what are the issues Gencos have and whether there is enough generation, I have brought, and this report is based on the national grid, because every day I have a staff that captures what NCC projects. Sometimes the data does not really match, because when I see that, like as at yesterday 7:30 in the evening, the grid was on their site, they were reporting 700 megawatts. I quickly send message to NCC. I say it can't be possible.
NCC, not national.
Okay, National Control Center.
That's right.
Yes, NCC means National Control Center at Osun State, Osogbo. So I send message to them. I've not gotten the response yet. That sorry, by 6 o'clock it was over 3,000. How come from 6 o'clock and by 7:15, 7:30 we are about 700 with about only 6 generation plants on the grid? and they've not responded to me. Now that brings me to what my colleague also Etin latched on. We don't see anything. The power sector, we see what is happening through the eyes of NCC. So if whatever they show on their dashboard, that we see, and so we don't really know what is going on. When I saw that, I checked with my Gencos, and they said we are on the grid, we're generating. For example, I also give you a case in point. The last comment that you made on why is it that most of the generation companies were on maintenance. That was reference to a publication, a press conference, a press release issued by TCN through their media aid, which printed out 14 generation companies not generating, and that is why there was no generation. And the Gencos were not happy and said, come, please respond. Because as a matter of fact, as at that day, Shiroro was generating and was on the grid, but Shiroro was on that list, and several other power plants. So I am not putting the blame. That's why I said when I came here, I don't want to blame anybody, because they are trying. The Oshobo staff, I know them. In fact, they are like juggling, I don't know, so many balls at the same time, as he explained. Because to maintain grid integrity, you have to check the volume of generation coming, you have to check the integrity of the transmission